History books show us Hitler as the dictator, the monster, the mastermind of chaos. But behind that image was a man built of contradictions, paranoia, and absurd obsessions. He feared cats, loved sweets, and spent hours deciding what color uniforms should be. He once banned smoking, but drowned himself in caffeine and nerve drugs. This isn't the myth of Hitler you were taught. This is the deeply bizarre, often disturbing truth that was almost buried with him. Fact 1. The vegetarian who couldn't stop watching slaughter. Hitler called himself a man of peace to animals. He lectured dinner guests about the evils of meat, while his generals stared, terrified, pretending to care about carrots. Yet he was obsessed with war footage, hours of tanks crushing men and cities burning. His vegetarianism wasn't compassion, it was control. He believed eating plants made him purer, less animalistic, more divine. Ironically, his personal chef recalled him sweating, pale, and shaking from indigestion nearly every night. While the Reich starved, he was fed steamed vegetables and private films of destruction. Purity and violence served on the same plate. Fact 2. The artist who was rejected twice by Vienna. Before he became the Führer, Adolf Hitler was a failed painter. He applied to the Vienna Academy of Fine Arts twice, and both times they threw him out. His paintings? Neat architecture, lifeless streets, and no people. One examiner said, "He has no feeling for human form." That single sentence may have rewritten world history. Rejected, humiliated, and broke, Hitler slept in homeless shelters, sold postcards, and nursed his hatred. Those years shaped his obsession with control, order, and purity, the same cold perfectionism that later turned into genocide. His dream of painting beauty ended in designing death. Fact 3. The man who couldn't stand mirrors. By the late 1930s, Hitler refused to see his own reflection. His doctors noted he trembled violently in private, afraid of aging, illness, and death. He ordered all mirrors removed from his bunker. He called it focus, but it was fear. A dictator terrified of decay, obsessed with youth and perfection. He surrounded himself with blonde, healthy soldiers while hiding his failing body. His left hand shook uncontrollably. His stomach churned. His teeth rotted from drugs. The man who demanded a 1,000-year Reich couldn't face 10 more minutes of his own reflection. Fact 4. The drugged Führer. By 1944, Hitler's veins were a pharmacy. His personal doctor, Theodor Morell, injected him daily with a vitamin cocktail, which secretly included amphetamines, cocaine, and oxycodone. He called it energy for the will. In truth, Hitler was a trembling addict, powered by meth. His mood swings became explosive, calm in the morning, manic by noon, raging by night. Generals whispered that his decisions felt not of sound mind. The man preaching purity and discipline was living on a chemical leash. Every speech, every order, every tantrum of destiny, chemically induced. When the Reich collapsed, his dealer fled. Hitler never detoxed. He died, still buzzing. Fact 5. The hypochondriac who trusted no doctor. Hitler thought everyone wanted to poison him, and yet he let only one man touch his body: Morell. He didn't trust generals, secretaries, or even his cook. His meals were tested by young women who had to eat before him. If they lived an hour later, he'd dine. Once, during a stomachache, he screamed that the British had found a way to infect German food supplies. In truth, it was just constipation. He used up to 28 medications daily, pills, powders, injections, for fatigue, gas, and spiritual exhaustion. The self-proclaimed invincible leader was quite literally falling apart from the inside out. Fact 6. The architect of fantasy. Hitler wanted to rebuild Berlin into a new world capital, Germania. It was supposed to make Rome look like a toy village. He demanded avenues wide enough for 10 tanks side by side, and a dome so large that it could create its own weather inside. He showed the plans to Albert Speer like a child showing off a sandcastle. But by 1945, the same city was reduced to rubble and ashes. The world capital never rose. Only the graves of millions did. Even in defeat, Hitler still asked Speer, "Will they remember my vision?" They did, but not for its beauty. Fact 7. The man who couldn't say goodbye to his dog. Blondie, Hitler's German shepherd, was his only real companion. He trusted her more than any human. She ate from his plate, slept beside his bed, and wore a custom SS collar. In the final days, when the Red Army closed in, Hitler tested his cyanide on Blondie first, just to make sure it worked. The bunker fell silent after her death. Witnesses said he didn't cry. He simply sat still, staring at her body. It was his first real loss of loyalty. Within 2 days, he followed her into the same silence. Fact 8. The orator who hated his own voice. Every Hitler speech you've heard, the screaming, fist-pounding fanatic, was a performance. In private, he despised how he sounded. He spent hours rehearsing gestures in front of mirrors before they were removed, practicing pauses and rage like an actor. His photographer even staged speech rehearsals where he posed mid-yell to study how fury looked in light. Behind the microphone was a deeply insecure man who believed shouting could hide fear. He didn't speak with conviction. He shouted to drown his doubt. The voice that hypnotized millions was born from one man's terror of being ignored. Fact 9. The failed soldier who never fired a shot. Hitler loved to call himself a front-line veteran. But his World War I record was mostly running messages, not charging trenches. He carried orders between posts. Dangerous, yes, but far from glory. He was wounded once and temporarily blinded by gas. When Germany surrendered, he wept. Not for comrades, but for the dream of empire he thought was stolen from him. The myth of the brave warrior was one he built himself later, brick by brick, to hide the truth. He never led men into battle, never fired in combat, and never heard the cry of a dying soldier up close. His courage was paper, written by propaganda, not war. Fact 10. The painter who designed death. The same man who once sketched bridges and city streets later drew blueprints for concentration camps. Hitler personally reviewed the layout of Auschwitz's railways, insisting on efficiency. He replaced canvas with concrete, art with annihilation. When his architects presented him plans for new housing in occupied lands, he ordered, first, clear the existing population. He saw mass murder as logistics, Not cruelty, just organization. Somewhere inside the bunker walls, drafts of his cities of the future lay next to deportation schedules. The artist in him didn't vanish. It evolved into horror. Fact 11. The celibate with secrets. Hitler preached moral purity and discipline. The Führer must belong to no woman. But his private life told another story. Eva Braun, hidden away for years, lived like a ghost in his mountain retreat. She wasn't allowed to appear in public, to speak at events, or to be mentioned in the press. Their relationship existed in whispers, and photographs never meant to be seen. Yet behind closed doors, she filmed him smiling, joking, feeding his dog. Those home movies, light, domestic, absurd, show the dictator as a fragile man craving affection. On the night before his suicide, he finally married her. The next day, both were dead. Fact 12. The Führer who feared sleep. By the final months, Hitler dreaded the dark. He stayed awake past dawn, pacing, chain-smoking, muttering about betrayal and ghosts. He believed his dead generals visited him in dreams, sometimes smiling, sometimes accusing. He ordered guards to keep the lights on in his bunker 24 hours a day. One aide recalled him waking from a nightmare screaming, "They're coming through the walls!" Sleep had become his enemy, because in sleep there were no speeches, no armies, no applause, only silence. And silence was something he could never control. Fact 13. The dictator who feared the telephone. As the war turned against him, Hitler stopped trusting the very device that connected him to his empire, the telephone. He believed Allied spies were listening to every call, even inside his own bunker. He would shout orders, then demand that messages be delivered by hand instead, even across the same building. Communications slowed to chaos. His generals waited hours for simple confirmations, while he sat alone, staring at a silent receiver. For a man who once ruled Europe with a voice, the silence of a phone became unbearable. The Reich wasn't collapsing from bombs, it was collapsing from fear of being overheard. Fact 14. The genius who ignored reality. In 1945, Hitler still drew arrows on maps showing counterattacks from divisions that no longer existed. He believed entire armies could be reborn through willpower. When told the bridges were gone, he ordered them rebuilt overnight. When told the fuel was finished, he ordered tanks to advance anyway. His world had become theatre. He was the actor, and his lines never changed. His generals whispered that he lived in a fantasy of victory. One said, "He no longer commands Germany, he commands ghosts." Even as the Soviets closed in, Hitler clung to maps that showed not defeat, but a world that only existed in his head. Fact 15. The Führer who envied Hollywood. Hitler adored movies, especially American ones. He watched King Kong, Snow White, and Gone with the Wind in his private cinema. He even banned German studios from using actors he disliked, but secretly kept Hollywood reels for himself. He admired Walt Disney, calling Snow White a film of pure Aryan imagination. Ironically, the man who burned books couldn't resist Western storytelling. He dreamed of creating a German Hollywood after the war, vast film studios to shape the world's imagination. But as Berlin burned, The only movie left was the one he directed himself, the final act of his own downfall. Fact 16. The tyrant who planned his own funeral. Long before his death, Hitler prepared for the moment he'd fall. He dictated exactly how his body should be burned. No public display, no capture, no humiliation. He even had his aides rehearse the procedure with gasoline barrels in the garden. In those last hours, he looked almost calm, as if following a stage direction. He ordered his portrait removed, his medals packed away, and said to his staff, "History will understand me." But history did not. The pyre he designed to protect his image became the final symbol of his delusion. A dictator trying to erase his own end with fire. Fact 17. The loyalty that turned to ashes. In the final weeks, loyalty around Hitler disintegrated like smoke. His officers fled, his allies surrendered, and even Goering and Himmler tried to negotiate with the allies. When Hitler found out, he went pale, silent, then simply said, "So, the last faithful ones have betrayed me." It wasn't rage anymore, it was disbelief. For years he had demanded devotion stronger than love or reason. Now, standing in the ruins of his empire, he realized that fanaticism dies faster than a bomb. In the bunker, surrounded by trembling staff, he finally faced the truth he could never control. Loyalty built on fear has no heartbeat. Fact 18. The last birthday. April 20th, 1945, Hitler's 56th and final birthday. Berlin was shaking from artillery. Outside, children carried flowers to his bunker, escorted by SS guards. Inside, he looked ghostly, stooped, with one shaking hand behind his back. Joseph Goebbels toasted him with champagne that no one could swallow. Hitler barely spoke. He thanked them all, then muttered, "I should have been an artist." It was the first and last time he ever admitted regret. Hours later, Soviet shells struck close enough to make the walls tremble, and the guests left quietly, as if leaving a funeral. Fact 19. The Führer who wanted to take everyone with him. Hitler didn't just plan his own death. He wanted Germany to die too. He ordered bridges, factories, and railways destroyed, so the Allies would inherit nothing but ashes. His generals disobeyed, knowing millions would starve. He raged, calling his people unworthy of survival. This was no longer patriotism. It was pure spite. The man who promised to make Germany great again was ready to bury it with himself. When his architect Albert Speer later refused to follow those orders, Hitler's last words to him were chilling. "Then you too are a traitor." Fact 20. The silence before the end. On April 29, 1945, in the bunker beneath Berlin, the noise of war was replaced by an eerie stillness. Hitler married Eva Braun in a short, awkward ceremony. They signed their names with trembling hands, then ate pasta and drank cheap wine. The walls shook with distant explosions, but inside, it felt like the world had already ended. Witnesses described the air as heavy, like waiting for thunder that never came. The man who once demanded total control now simply sat, staring at the floor. The empire of noise had fallen into silence. Fact 21. The last command. Hitler's final order wasn't for troops, but for his own death. On April 30th, 1945, after lunch, he walked into his private room with Eva. His aides heard a single shot. Quick, final. When they entered, he was slumped on the couch, his pistol on the floor, Eva beside him. They wrapped his body in a blanket, carried it up to the garden, and burned it with gasoline. Just as he had planned, the flames rose, but there was no victory. only the smell of oil and smoke. The Reich had no anthem left to play. Fact 22. The man history refused to forget. Hitler wanted to be remembered as a savior, not a destroyer. He believed that one day his vision would be understood. Instead, his name became a warning, the line humanity swore never to cross again. His empire lasted 12 years. His memory, stained with millions of deaths, still haunts the century that followed. In the end, the man who tried to become immortal found only infamy. The world remembers him, not for what he built, but for everything he destroyed. In the ruins of Berlin, all that remained of Hitler was smoke, ash, and disbelief. His story wasn't one of greatness. It was a long, spiraling collapse of delusion, fear, and control. Behind the speeches and symbols was just a trembling man who couldn't face his own reflection. And maybe that's the real warning of history. Monsters don't start as monsters. They start as people who forget how to be human.